Hello and welcome. Today we're discussing the Riverside Housing District project. I'm joined by City Council member Cindy Claycomb and Ty Tabing, a resident who lives near the project area. Thank you both for joining us today.
Sure.
Councilmember Claycomb, could you start off by explaining a little bit about what the Riverside Housing District project is?
Yes, the Riverside Housing District is located at 2050 West 11th Street North on land purchased from a private entity. So the city does not own this property nor has ever owned it. Homeowners may build up to 40 single-family homes with bungalow-type architecture, and in addition, there'll be some improvements to a neighborhood trailhead park and the adjacent river path and some other significant community benefits.
The developer purchased the private property and is constructing single-family homes. Who's paying for improvements for the park?
Yeah, that's a good question. The cost of these improvements will be funded by tax increment funding by a district, and it consists of just those single-family homes that are in that area. That's the district. So no financial costs, no property tax rate increases for the neighborhood.
Ty, you live near the project. Could you explain a little bit about what the site looks like now and some of the issues it's had in the past?
Well, the site now is basically the largest sticker patch in the city that I'm aware of. When I was in high school in the 80s, I remember challenges related to that site when it was actually functioning as and inhabited. I think after that there was a lot of graffiti, vandalism. That building really went through some tough times. And I think that now, it's been demolished, the site has been cleared. It's just sitting there. It's a fallow site next to Sims Park, next to the golf course. It's really kind of a perfect site in my mind for residential because it takes advantage of the neighborhood's walkability, access to the river trail, the golf course. To me, it's a great location for a residential project.
Yeah, I think that's right. It is. I mean, it is, like you said, it's a sticker patch, and I think people forget what was there before because now it does just look like open space.
Yeah, and back when it was a school, I presume, I don't recall some of the specifics, but there must have been buses coming and going. So even now when you think about the traffic impact, I can't imagine this project being any more harmful in the way of traffic than it was 30, 40 years ago. And since it's been sitting vacant for so long, of course, there will be an increase in traffic, but that's a good thing for the neighborhood. Yeah. And moreover, the activity related to residential tends to be in the mornings and the evenings, which is kind of off time for the golf facility. So it really kind of works in sync together, I think.
Yeah.
Other than removing the sticker patch, how do you think this project will help the neighborhood?
Well, the reality of Riverside is there's great housing stock in Riverside. There isn't anything really new to speak of. I mean, this is a great infill opportunity. One of the plans that the city has put forth the last few years that I'm a big proponent of is the Places for People plan, which anticipates these kind of projects. I mean, it encourages infill development. And, this is in the core of the city. If this project were taking place on the fringe of the city, I would have a very different take and perception of the project. But it's activating a fallow site. It's bringing more housing stock to a neighborhood that is in demand. People want to live in Riverside. So I think it's going to be a great addition to the neighborhood. It adds some good price points and further diversifies the housing stock in the neighborhood.
There's been some confusion about whether or not the city sold riverfront property. Can you clear that up for us?
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, this is private property, and the city did not sell riverfront property. What we ended up doing, there were two small pieces of land on the north and south ends of this property, and those were owned by the city, and we did a land swap with additional payment to the city to put the city's property all together and the builder's property all together. So the property at the south end was really unusable for the city, and it's not the riverfront property. The city still owns all the property right along the river. There was nearly equal size in terms of the swap the developer got 34,341 square feet of land. The city got 34,355 square feet of land, so a little bit more. Plus, the city also got $15,000 for that. And that money then is going to allow us to have at least a little bit of a start before the TIF kicks in, before the tax increment financing kicks in, to start thinking about the amenities that ought to be in that park, and that $15,000 will go towards that. And so that conglomeration of land up at the north end allows us to have a trailhead park, which wouldn't have been possible without that land swap.
In addition to improvements to the park, I understand there will be infrastructure improvements to the sewer system. How is that going to be funded?
And that's going to be paid for by the TIF, the tax increment financing. And I've mentioned that a couple times, so maybe I'd explain what that means. What tax increment financing does is it captures the incremental property taxes that come from a development. So whatever property tax is being collected on that property right now, all of the entities continue to capture that property tax. And then anything above that, just for those houses that are built, will be used to finance these infrastructure improvements, so sewer improvements, and also the trailhead park and the new, or improvements to the bike path along there. So no property and tax increases are associated with project for properties outside of that TIF district, that up to 40 houses there.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think there's been confusion from people about that. What do you think, Ty?
Well, I think tax increment financing, tax, is the word tax in TIF is a little off-putting for some people, and it's kind of a difficult concept to understand. I mean, it's really sort of the delta, if you will, that comes from developing that site that allows these kind of projects to move forward. You really capture the growth and fund public benefits that benefits not only residents at Riverside, but the whole city. I mean, in my opinion, the river, the Arkansas River, is the most underutilized asset we have in Wichita. So this brings attention to the river, it brings energy, it brings people, it brings investment to the river. So I think that's the key public benefit that really should encourage people to support this project and recognize that it's really a win-win for not only the neighborhood but also the city.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't really thought about that. The thing I like about TIFs is that the money that is captured, at least on most projects, goes right back into that area, but also, as you say, benefits the entire city because people can take advantage of these.
Yeah, and it
amenities.
localizes the dollars within that triangle right there and funds improvements for that area and the larger area.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Ty, there's also been some confusion about the zoning of the property. Could you speak to that a little bit?
With zoning, you can do certain things as of right, just by being the property owner. And it's my understanding that this has pretty loose zoning that allows for anything from a cell tower to a cemetery to a school, even industrial uses could be on this site. Of course, none of those enhance the neighborhood. This project, in my opinion, greatly enhances the neighborhood. So some of those uses just don't fit. And it would be, I think, a real shame if those things were to be constructed on that site that's visible from 13th Street, from Amadon, from the river. It's too important of a site to go to those kind of uses, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's, as we've talked, from the beginning, this is private property. It's not city-owned property, so we don't really get to decide how it's used or not used beyond zoning. So zoning's what really dictates what goes on a site like this. And I agree with you. It's like some of these other uses would not be a fit with the neighborhood, but up to 40 bungalow-style houses, even though they're new, which I think is a good thing because it adds to the housing stock and kind of diversifies the housing stock, it certainly is a better fit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's Riverside. It's not an industrial park.
Yeah.
So there was of course a lot of controversy about that cell tower at a different location in Riverside, and tremendous opposition naturally surfaced in response to that project. So that could be here, and that would be a real blighting influence, in my opinion, on the whole neighborhood. So this fits the neighborhood and contributes to its growth and its progress, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Councilmember, you discussed how these were new houses. This is obviously a new project, but it's been in the works for a long time. And I understand there have been a lot of neighborhood meetings leading up to this point. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. We had the builders that are looking at this bought the property, a couple years ago, I think, and so started talking about what they might want to do with that, and wanted to go to the neighbors and talk about that. And so I know that they've been to speak with neighbors that live right along Amadon there that are going to be looking right into this development. They've also been to several neighborhood association meetings to address people's concerns. They'd come to a meeting and people would, have ideas, and the builders would go back and make adjustments and then bring them back again. And so I think that's been really helpful because, again, because they already have the zoning they need, they didn't have to do those kinds of meetings. I attended most of those meetings when I could, and I found it very informative. And again, I think builders who are interested in this area as opposed to, not being interested in just saying, hey, we're going to put up whatever we want in here, but being really interested in this area and adding to its vitality and saying, okay, what can we do to work with the neighbors that live here? I think that's just, it was really beneficial, and I've talked, you and I talked, that's why you're on this with me, and I've talked with other people in the neighborhood that have really appreciated that.
Yeah, I mean, the density has gone down dramatically. I mean,
Yeah.
at one point there was a tower and surrounding duplexes, I believe. So, you don't always work with developers that are responsive. And it seems like in this case, the developers have listened and responded accordingly.
Yeah, we should have shown that, like the first picture they showed to the neighborhood association with these little.
It was a tower.
Yeah, it was.
No other word but tower.
It was, and yes. And I don't think that would have been as appealing as these, again, homes that fit right in.
Right, and again, activate a space that is kind of at the edge and a little challenging to really activate properly. And I think that this site plan really responds to the river, it responds to the whole of Riverside, and really adds to our community. I'm excited to see what it looks like in the future, and get rid of that really gnarly sticker pad.
Yeah, that's right. I've had neighbors tell me that they have to pick their dog. They get out there and it's like, oh my gosh, and they pick their dogs up because it is such a sticker patch that they're gonna have to get home and get all those little stickers out of their dogs, and they're not willing to do that.
Right, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Don't blame them.
Councilmember Claycomb, you spoke to some of the public input we've had up to this point, and we've gotten a lot of questions. And one of the most frequently asked questions is why the city is letting this property be sold to private developers.
Yes, and again, the city didn't own the property, so we didn't sell it. The owners that had it before sold it to the builders who are going to build there now.
And once again, how large is the site?
It's almost 8 acres, so it's a good sized site for those homes that are going to go in there.
Ty, why would the city approve new homes to be built here?
Well, again, I think it's important to point out that this is consistent with some of the long-term planning objectives that the city has. This is an infill site, and so activating this site with contextual projects is exactly what I have to look at my notes, I always get the name wrong, Places for People plan encourages. It really recommends reinvesting in mature neighborhoods such as this, rather than building on a green site on the fringe of the city. So it enhances our core and brings more people into the core who will just bring more vitality and encourage greater uses and more business development going forward. So I think that's a big deal. I mean, these plans are passed with a vision for the future, and cities around the country are really embracing infill development, filling in those missing teeth and activating them and doing projects that fit the context of the neighborhood. And I think this really does that.
Yeah.
And what does the current zoning allow on the site?
As Ty mentioned earlier, there are many residential, public, and civic and commercial and industrial uses that could go there. on the site with no zoning changes. So, but conceivably, I think the one that was of most concern is that a 55-foot tall building with 75 apartments per acre could go on this site. So that's a 5-story high-rise with 585 apartment units.
Wow.
And that would be a lot more density than what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and of course that would impact traffic patterns and have a lot of, I mean, it would expand beyond this footprint in terms of the neighborhood impact.
Yeah.
This really localizes it, I think. But if it was something of that scale, it'd be a different story altogether.
It certainly would. You know, and Ty, I know we have a couple more questions, I think, but one thing, so I know you're here as a citizen, but the other thing that you are is you're the District 6 Board of Park Commissioners representative.
Mm-hmm.
So just from a park perspective, what do you think? I mean, I know this is a small park, but it is a park, and so you would have something to say.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's also a park that, again, is visible from 13th Street as you look across there. So, you know, to be able to see nice green space from a busy arterial street like 13th Street, I think, you know, Riverside's fortunate. We have a lot of great green space already. But to have these little small pocket parks that are accessible to everybody in that kind of sub area, you know, more green space is what we all want and our quality of lives. I think the last year with the pandemic has really spoken to the importance of green space and the ability to get out and, you know, have some elbow room to enjoy your lives. And I think, again, not only is this important for that sort of beachhead location, but again, the bike trails itself, to me, is something that really needs to be addressed citywide. And again, there are some areas, this is a little bit of a ghost town.
Yeah.
It should be active with bicyclists and walkers, and you just don't see that kind of energy down there. My hope is that this will begin to will change the perception of the area, which will, you know, bring more people down in addition to the folks who live in these 40 buildings. So I think it's going to be great for not only for that small pocket park, but also for the larger bike trail.
Yeah, I do too. Absolutely.
Councilmember, why is a TIF being used rather than some other type of funding for the proposed infrastructure improvements?
Yeah, and that is a question we've gotten several times. And, you know, there could be other funding mechanisms to fund this kind of thing. But none of the other funding mechanisms will benefit the neighborhood with this new park or with the improvements to the bicycle and pedestrian paths. So that's why I'm supportive of this. If it were, you know, without those, that makes this not as appealing to me anyway. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you know, this site is generating the funds to fund those public improvements. Yeah. So again, it's localizing the dollars that come from development and enhancing that area. So I'm not sure another tool would work as well.
Right.
I mean, the way this is kind of a pay-as-you-go allows for the developer to go, you know, not have to get the biggest loan possible to do a large, like if it was a big tower as originally anticipated. The funding for that's a lot more challenging. Whereas this, not only is the developer able to sort of take on less debt, but the city, of course, is not taking on any debt.
Right.
Through this TIF opportunity. So that's an important thing, of course, as the city's finances are always being scrutinized, especially with the pandemic these days.
Yeah, and I think that is something that, again, TIFs can be a complex funding mechanism to understand, but I think that's a really good point, that the city is not taking on the debt. This is a pay-as-you-go, and things get developed as the money becomes available.
Yeah, no additional tax burden for the city.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
I hope we've answered some of the questions that folks have, and so.
I hope so. I'm excited to see what happens. I fully support the project and look forward to the groundbreaking later this year.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining us today. If you'd like more information on the Riverside Housing District project, please visit wichita.gov.